Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday everybody. First up, a report published today by US-based Bloomberg Intelligence argues that protests in China are on the rise as the effects of a slowing economy rattle citizens and Beijing refrains from taking broader steps to shore up growth. According to a report published yesterday by the China Dissent Monitor, cases of dissent increased 18% in the second quarter compared to the same period last year. This is what the Bloomberg Intelligence report is basing its own findings on. The majority of events linked in the report are to economic issues. Of the events, 44% related to labour and 21% involved aggravated homeowners, the report noted. Generally, it defines dissent as acts of voicing grievances, asserting rights, or advancing interests in connection with the authorities or the powerful. Now, we need to examine this in context. This unrest is unlikely to threaten Beijing. Demonstrations are often small and isolated in nature, with protesters rarely directing their anger at the leader or the party. However, from Beijing's perspective, the trend is concerning. The China Dissent Monitor report highlights the economic challenges facing Beijing that are threatening to morph into broader governance issues. Quote, people in China are grappling with an economic slowdown and waning confidence as a 4-decade rise in living standards shows signs of stalling. A real estate crisis, trade war with the US, private sector crackdowns, and costly pandemic lockdowns have all weighed on growth despite Beijing's measures to stimulate the economy. End quote. Kevin Slatton, who leads the China Dissent Monitor project, expressed in the report, quote, in recent decades, the Communist Party has essentially demanded citizens should submit to its one-party authoritarianism as a trade-off for economic prosperity. As the ramifications of slowing economic growth impact more citizens, it may undermine this trade-off. End quote. The researchers noted a growing number of protests in China, even with increased censorship efforts since mid-2022. The ongoing property crisis remains a major factor, driving more protests despite Beijing's intensified efforts to stabilize the market. Protests related to real estate sector have increased by 10% over the past year. Homeowners and construction workers were involved in 44% of all dissent cases documented across more than 370 provincial-level cities in the China Dissent Monitor database. Real estate giants like Country Garden Holdings Co. and China Evergrande Group saw the highest number of protests. While protests related to labour and property disputes have become more frequent, they remain sporadic and have not reached the intensity of the 2022 protests against COVID-19 lockdowns. Economic protests often stemmed from grievances such as halted housing projects, sudden company closures, lack of liquidity, unpaid wages, and local government struggles to provide adequate benefits for retirees. Over the past 2 years, Guangdong province in southern China, a manufacturing hub, has seen many economic protests, reflecting the slowdown's impact. In contrast, a higher percentage of protests in Xi'an were related to real estate issues. Li Qianren, director of Modern Alpha at Wisdom Tree Inc. in the US, speaking to Bloomberg, explained that the slowing economy poses a governance challenge to the central government, although these protests usually do not pose an existential threat. Quote, more protests mean central government policies can't be effectively carried out. Its strategic long-term goals cannot be achieved when short-term needs are now more on the people's minds. End quote. Next up for the economy, we are seeing yet more signs of lagging consumption despite Beijing's best efforts to stimulate it. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin reports today that Beijing's major food and beverage companies saw their combined profits slump almost 90% year-on-year in the first half of the year, quote, underscoring the weak state of consumption in China's big cities amid the country's patchy post-COVID recovery. End quote. According to recently published data by the Beijing Municipal Bureau of Statistics, in the January through June period, their total profits nosedived 88.8% year-on-year to 180.3 million yuan, $25.3 million US. Caixin explains that the red ink in the first half of the year was an improvement on the first quarter. However, when these food and beverage companies recorded a loss of 453.7 million yuan compared with a profit of 655.5 million yuan in the same period in 2023. A breakdown of the January through June data shows that profits earned through fast food services amounted to 243.8 million yuan, while the formal dining out sector reported a loss of 76.5 million yuan. Quote, large cities like Beijing and Shanghai, home to many high-income groups, have become hubs for high-end dining and luxury retail. However, salary cuts in the financial sector, layoffs in major tech companies, and a sluggish real estate market have slowed income growth in these cities, leading to reduced spending power and a decline in consumer confidence. In the first half, the share of consumption in per capita disposable income for Beijing was 56.1%, down from 62.4% in the same period in 2019. According to Caixin calculations based on government data, the share for Shanghai dropped to 58.9% from the pre-pandemic level of 63.8%. End quote. Today, Matthew C. Klein, an outspoken expert on the intersection of economics, public policy, and financial markets, posted these graphs, arguing, quote, the shortfall in household spending since 2019 is massive, no matter how you count it. End quote. Now, speaking of food, next up, a new study has found that obesity-related cancers are increasing rapidly in China, particularly among younger people. The analysis of over 650,000 cancer cases from 2007 through 2021 revealed that individuals born between 1997 and 2001 are 25 times more likely to be diagnosed with these cancers compared to those born between 1962 and 1966. The annual growth rate of obesity-related cancers in China was 3.6% during this period, while non-obesity-related cancers remained steady. However, the annual increase was as high as 15.3% among people aged 25 to 29. The research, led by endocrinologist Yang Jinhui from the Capital Medical University in Beijing and published in the Med Journal of Cell Press, highlights that rising cancer rates among young adults are linked to recent changes in environmental and dietary exposures. The study noted that the most rapidly increasing obesity-related cancers among young people include colorectal, breast, thyroid, kidney, and uterine cancers. The researchers warned that without significant public health interventions, obesity-related cancer rates in China could double in the next decade. They recommended promoting healthier diets, reducing consumption of ultra-processed foods, and encouraging physical activity. Factors contributing to the rise include physical inactivity, smoking, red meat, and alcohol consumption, and a lack of early screening, according to the report. The study also pointed out that wealthier regions in China, like Shanghai and the provinces of Zhejiang and Jiangsu, have seen higher increases in cancer cases compared to Western countries. According to the study, the adoption of so-called westernized lifestyles is identified as a key factor in the obesity surge in China. Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post reports that despite ongoing public health efforts, the number of overweight or obese children and adolescents in China is nearing US levels. In the 1980s, this issue was rare, but in 2019, 34% of Chinese adults were classified as overweight and 16% as obese. Globally, obesity-related cancers have become a major public health issue, and China appears to be no exception. Okay, we have one more update to cover, but just quickly, if you are enjoying today's episode, if you're getting some value from this episode, I have a huge favor to ask. That is just to hit the like button. Sharing and subscribing is also a tremendous help tells the algorithm to show this to new people, and it's the only way in which the channel can grow. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much. This week, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights released a statement ahead of the second anniversary of a critical report urging China to end human rights violations in its western province of Xinjiang. The statement from the UN's top human rights office expressed that 2 years after the major UN report suggesting that Chinese government actions in Xinjiang, quote, may constitute crimes against humanity, many problematic laws and policies remain in place in the region. End quote. The Human Rights Office said that it had held, quote, detailed discussions, end quote, with Beijing on various significant human rights issues, but still faces challenges including limited access to information and concerns about reprisals against those cooperating with the United Nations. The US and human rights organizations have cited satellite images, leaked documents, and eyewitness testimonies as evidence of the mass detention, political indoctrination, and forced labor of over 1 million Uyghurs in the country, as well as accusations of torture and forced sterilization. The US and EU have also imposed sanctions on Chinese officials allegedly responsible for repressive policies in the region. China has consistently denied these allegations, arguing that the camps are vocational training centers aimed at countering terrorism and extremism. However, it's worth noting that Beijing even admits that these vocational training centers are compulsory. Beijing also says that human rights accusations are just Western propaganda designed to undermine China's rise. Meanwhile, in recent days, authorities in Xinjiang have pledged to prioritize stability and security, aiming to transform the region into a strategic barrier against geopolitical risks. Over the weekend, the state-run Xinjiang Daily published a statement from the Xinjiang Committee of the Communist Party from the end of its annual plenary session on Saturday. The committee included top regional party and government officials. The statement emphasized that maintaining social stability should be a top priority. It called for enhancing the systems and mechanisms for safeguarding national security, strengthening legal and operational frameworks for counter-terrorism, and maintaining public security, particularly along Xinjiang's borders with countries such as Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Regarding economic development, the committee urged accelerated oil and gas exploration, more efficient and clean use of coal, development of green energy, and exploration of strategic mineral resources. The committee also stressed the importance of enhancing the legal framework governing religious affairs and called for fostering a stronger sense of identity and unity among all ethnic groups, emphasizing the need to promote and educate the concept of the Chinese nation as a, quote, single community, end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.